Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a literally high-stakes, real-time geopolitical standoff. We're going to take a deep dive into the escalating military tension between the US and Iran, right in one of the most critical maritime choke points on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz. We'll break down the military strategies, the completely dueling narratives, and the massive global economic consequences of this conflict. And we're doing it using only the facts, figures, and direct claims right from the ground. Okay, let's dive into this. What actually happens when two major military powers clash in one of the world's absolute busiest oil trade routes? The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a body of water. It is literally the vital artery for global crude oil distribution. When tension spikes here, the entire world's energy market feels the shockwave. Right now, we're witnessing a direct confrontation that's threatening to just completely paralyze this international trade route. So to understand how we got here, we really have to look at the catalyst. The United States military launched an operation dubbed Project Freedom. Kicked off on a Monday morning, the officially stated goal of this mission is to clear an Iranian blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. President Donald Trump characterized it as a friendly blockade by the U.S., basically framed as a humanitarian effort to safely escort commercial vessels out of the danger zone, since many are reportedly running out of food. But Iran, they firmly reject this operation. They're calling it a dead end and a violation of ceasefires, flat out refusing to open the strait as long as the U.S. maintains its own blockade. So what exactly happened when Project Freedom began? Well, we immediately entered the fog of war. On one hand, you have the U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, claiming they successfully attacked and destroyed 6 to 7 small Iranian boats that were actively disrupting commercial shipping. But on the other hand, senior Iranian military officials completely deny that narrative. According to Iran's Tasnim news agency, the U.S. actually struck just 2 small civilian cargo boats, tragically resulting in 5 civilian deaths. We are literally seeing 2 entirely different realities being reported from the exact same waters. And this massive disconnect is heavily fueled by the rhetoric at the very top. Listen to this. U.S. President Donald Trump stated, "They don't have a navy anymore. Think of it. They had 159 ships, 0 left in the first 2 weeks." Trump has forcefully claimed that the Iranian military is severely weakened, lacking air and ground defenses, and that the U.S. has just effectively wiped out their fleet. He even questioned the quality of the Iranian ships, asking why they had to be sent to the bottom of the sea instead of just being captured. It's a stark, uncompromising claim, right? And it sets a really aggressive tone for this entire operation. To back up that rhetoric and actually enforce Project Freedom, the U.S. didn't just send a couple of ships. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale we're talking about here. We're looking at 15,000 troops newly injected into the Middle East, guided missile destroyers, over 100 aircraft, including FA-18 Super Hornets launching straight off the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Plus, they're bringing in advanced sensor technology, drones, unmanned submarines, and ground vehicles. It is a massive, multi-platform show of technological and military might, all aimed at securing the strait and locking down Iranian ports. But the U.S. isn't trying to do this entirely alone. This conflict is actively pulling in other global players. After reports surfaced that a South Korean cargo ship was attacked by Iran, President Trump actually took to his social media platform, Truth Social. He directly requested that South Korea, along with other nations whose ships are currently trapped, step up and join the U.S. mission in the Strait of Hormuz. It really highlights how localized maritime security instantly becomes a massive international diplomatic issue. Now, the conflict has already spilled well over the borders of the strait. Let me walk you through how fast this escalated. First, a United Arab Emirates tanker, one affiliated with the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, was reportedly attacked by 2 suspected Iranian drones while just transiting the strait. Shortly after that, a massive fire broke out at the oil refinery in the UAE's port of Fujairah. That is a highly strategic Gulf export facility, and it was hit by another drone strike that injured 3 people. This immediately messed with logistics. Airspace was disrupted, and flights bound for the UAE actually had to be diverted to Muscat, Oman. Diplomatically, the UAE fiercely condemned this as maritime piracy orchestrated by Iran. Meanwhile, an Iranian military officer flat out denied any involvement or any plans to attack the UAE. While the U.S. relies on billions of dollars in high-tech military hardware, Iran is leaning into massive human mobilization. 2 million. Let that number sink in. 2 million Iranian citizens, including public figures and officials, have registered as national defense volunteers since this conflict kicked off. Every single night, across various cities in Iran, citizens are pouring into the streets in unwavering support of their government against the U.S. and Israel. It's an absolutely profound display of domestic unity, showing they are ready for any scenario, including all-out war. So the really crucial point here is that we are in a total diplomatic deadlock. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, responded directly to Trump's dissatisfaction with Iran's peace proposals with a super stark ultimatum. They said Trump only has two choices: continue an impossible war or accept the agreement offered by Iran. See, Iran had previously submitted a proposal offering to open the strait, but only if the U.S. ended its blockade, withdrew troops from Lebanon, and, this is the big one, lifted those crippling military and economic sanctions. Trump totally rejected this, claiming it didn't align with U.S. interests. And that led the IRGC to declare that Washington's decision-making space is just rapidly shrinking. Tactically speaking, Iran is definitely not backing down. They are literally drawing new lines in the water. Right after the launch of Project Freedom, Iran released a new map declaring a highly specific maritime control zone. So, Iranian military control now officially claims the area between Mount Mubarak in Iran and South Fujairah in the UAE, stretching westward from Keshma Island to Quwain. And they've issued a really stern warning: no commercial ships, and certainly no U.S. warships, are permitted to cross these coordinates without direct coordination and approval from Iranian forces. But let's pivot and look at the actual economic execution on the water. 25. That is the number of oil tankers loaded with crude oil that departed from Iranian ports in the month of April alone. Despite the massive U.S. naval blockade and all that intense surveillance we talked about, these tankers still set sail to test the perimeter. Now, the U.S. Navy did successfully divert 7 ships back to port, and they seized 2 others. But the rest? They managed to slip right through to their designated rendezvous points. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer volume of oil actively evading this blockade. 1,900,000. That's how many barrels of crude oil were carried on just one single Iranian supertanker, named the Hug, which successfully evaded U.S. monitoring efforts. I mean, that is an absolutely massive amount of oil. And it wasn't alone. Another huge tanker, the Daria, carrying 1.88 million barrels initially meant for India, also successfully changed its course to evade U.S. naval forces. So the economic engine, driven by these alternative routes, is definitely still humming. And where exactly are they going? Well, to bypass the lockdown Strait of Hormuz, Iranian supertankers are utilizing a massive logistical detour. Here is the journey. They depart Iranian ports under incredibly heavy tension. They somehow manage to evade the U.S. Navy's advanced monitoring network. They journey way down south into the Lombok Strait in Indonesia. And finally, they arrive at planned rendezvous points in the Rio Islands. This brilliantly illustrates how a localized conflict in the Middle East can instantly alter global shipping logistics, suddenly elevating the strategic importance of places like Indonesian waters. Which really brings us to our final critical thought to chew on. If the Hormuz blockade can be successfully bypassed by massive supertankers carrying millions of barrels of oil through alternative international routes, how effective is Project Freedom ultimately? I mean, as billions in military hardware stocks up and diplomatic rhetoric reaches a boiling point, the real-world economic reality on the water tells a whole different story of adaptation and evasion. It's a complex, constantly evolving puzzle that proves just how interconnected and resilient the global oil trade really is. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on the data as this global standoff continues to develop.